Welcome, my darlings, to my humble chateau. Please make yourself very comfortable. Relax your mind and release your imagination to me. I will bring you a story to entrance and entertain. Perhaps a frightening one. Perhaps a steampunk. Perhaps a bit of mythology. Anyway, sit back, enjoy, and subscribe to me. Interview with Subject 13 by JxB Paperboy. Subject 13 sat in a silver chair in the middle of a room set up like an interrogation room. A single table, 2 chairs, a one-way mirror, and a camera in the corner. She was used to this room by now. After 4 years of confinement, voices whispered in her ear frantically, and she suppressed the urge to quiet them. Today the voices weren't angry, but nervous. They told 13 they couldn't stand the closed space, not even the well-kept yard that she and fellow subject 14 talked in twice daily. Dr. Q knocked on the door, peeking his head in. 13 wanted him to stay away, warned by the voices that prophesied warnings in her ear. 13, I haven't seen you since last Sunday. He smiled sweetly to her, sat down, and pulled out folders and papers that she had seen thousands of times. So, how have you been? Her voice was hushed and low, just barely over the voices whispering throughout the room. Fine. Q pressed his knuckles against his palm, rubbing them slowly. Okay, well, you know the drill by now. So how about you tell me how you've been sleeping lately? The bags under 13's eyes sagged with the weight of the question. Her voices pushed her to say well, even though she knew Q knew about her sleeping habits. She yawned and stretched as casually as possible to sell her lie, but the voices poked her neck like a cold, wet sponge. Her neck tensed ever so slightly, but she hoped that only the camera saw it. Q smiled slowly, heaving a sigh of exhaustion. He knew 13 was lying again, and had noticed the epileptic twitch in her neck that she always had. He could tell psychosis was taking its toll on the poor girl, and she refused to get better. He ran test after test, observation after observation, and nothing changed with her. He was on the verge of giving up, but he knew that 13 appreciated the help he had tried to give. Finally, Q confessed this exhaustion to his beloved patient. 13, I don't know how much longer you or I can keep doing this. 13 froze. Voices groped at her thoughts, dragging them in front of her mind's eyes, screaming like racehorses. Fingers poking at her sides, one scraping down her back slowly. Many voices threatened her for losing their chance to rest. Others thanked her for dumping the annoyance of a man that sat in front of them. But one voice stood out. A soft voice echoed over the hushed whispers. 13, it's Wendell, your friend. Don't forget why you're here. You're here for us, the people only you can see. 13 snapped back to reality as Q asked for her purpose in being here, clinging to life as she did. She panicked for a moment. Voices argued with each other, attempting to force answers onto her like a model, stark nude in a clothing studio. The air cooled around her, and Wendell's soft touch held her shoulder, reassuring her decision. "No, I do not, but..." A thought, what she believed to be her thought, came to the forefront. "Wendell does. She says she knows everything about this place." An invisible club hit the back of her head. 13 flinched, shut her eyes, and peeked a glance at Q. Wendell held her shoulder, slightly denser than before. "What are you doing, 13? Q's gaze on 13 refocused on her head. 13 flinched, considering whether or not to get up and check it. "Are you okay, 13? Who's Wendell?" 13's hands began to fidget on their own. 2 male voices, the angry Marco's and the cautious Fred, cried out in her mind, silencing the other voices. "Marco says I shouldn't tell you anything. And Fred says you're not who you say you are." Q drew a breath in. 13 was lying, of course, for Q knew that he had only taken this job to help people, not to hurt. The same intentions as most doctors. He leaned forward and examined his patient, dressed in ripped rags. The air had gotten colder since they had started, and 13's shadow crawled against the wall, a few inches, even though there wasn't a single window to the outside in there. Something was wrong. Q felt it in his throat, but he felt connected to 13. He could save her. 13, I need you to do something for me." Q stood. He was not tall, but his figure imposed on 13, making her feel like a child about to be beaten. Q looked down instinctively, exposing the forming bruise on her head. Marilyn and Kaya screamed and shouted in despair, while Michael and Angelique shouted at her angrily. A lanky shadow moved under the camera in the corner of her eye, and she began to shiver nervously. Q looked down with worried interest. The bump was small, about the size of a small fist, like an abusive younger sibling had hit her in a fitful rage. This wasn't the first time this had happened. Once 13 had scratches and cuts on her wrists, and something had once violently bitten her leg. Other times, Q swore he had spotted scratches on her neck and sides. Whatever abused her was human, but also not human to treat her in such a way. He had made requests to monitor her room, perhaps to protect her, in his mind, but he knew that it would impede on her privacy, something he knew she needed. The shadow crept up under the camera slowly, and 13 saw what was going to happen before the others could get up. 13 stood, much to Q's surprise, and turned to look him in the eye. Tearless sorrow had filled them as she slowly balled her hands into helpless rage. She couldn't feel the finger on her spine, and her shoulder felt warm without Wendell's hands. Behind Q, a woman with a cheek ripped open and wild. Pale hair stood transparently behind him. She begged her not to do what she was going to do, but Angelique silenced her voice with a hand on her throat. Q was the only person she was allowed to be close to, and he was hers to keep. But Marilyn, Angelique, and Wendell didn't care for him. 13 broke down, fell to her knees, and wept as her friends made their move. The shadow broke the camera from the ceiling, sending it flying at the mirror, while Wendell thrust Q against the back wall. Marilyn and Kaya grabbed the chairs and lifted them, howling like beasts. Marco and Fred held Q to the wall, while Michael and another nameless voice beat him with their fists. Invisible fists beat at the door, the mirror, the walls, anywhere as long as it made noise. 13 kept her head down, screaming as if her life depended on it. Wendell placed a hand on her softly, as if to smother the screaming with a smoldering but silent rage. She hushed the shaken woman as the other nameless spirits put their hands on 13 as well. "It's okay. It's okay," they said. "He was no longer capable of helping us. They will get us a new one, and we will test him, just like we've tested him." So quoth this raven. Now, I believe there may be more of this story to come. It would be interesting to see. If you liked it, please give JxB Paperboy some attention. Go read his stories and give me a like and subscribe and ring the little bell if you haven't, so you'll know when to come up and see me. And leave me a comment. I always love those. Good or bad, let me know what you think, and I will comment back. Bye-bye, my darlings.